Okay, we're live. Hey, it's Ashley here. I'm a holistic health and nutrition coach, and I'm here with Ethan today. And we are going to talk about a very controversial topic in the natural health world, and that is vitamin D supplementation. So, Ethan, do you want to share a little bit about yourself first before we start chatting?
Okay, so I'm also a holistic nutritionist and detox specialist. I've been in natural health for about 30 years. As you say, this particular topic is not just controversial because of a difference between the natural health world and conventional health. There's loads of controversies between those two, but this within the natural health world is a little controversial because vitamin D, which isn't even a vitamin, we'll get to that, is being very strongly pushed by big pharma through regular medical doctors and so on. And largely, the natural proponents have bought into that and they're also pushing it. It's probably one of the single most pushed supplements today, especially in the current situation with the C word. It's being heavily pushed. And I believe that there's very strong reasons why we do not want to be supplementing with it outside of certain food supplements like fish and the handful of foods that do have vitamin D. Again, when I say vitamin D or vitamin, because I'm UK, I'm using the term commonly understood. It's not a vitamin, it's a hormone. And part of the deception around D is the fact that they call it a vitamin because we're used to supplementing with vitamins and believing that we need them and that we need to be getting them. And there's hardly any vitamin D in food. It's really hard to find foods with vitamin D, which should be a little bit of a warning. And because of that, and because of the test, a huge number of people are supplementing with it. So that's the topic for today.
Yeah, I agree. And, just from my own experience working with my medical professionals, it comes up a lot. It's always the topic of discussion, when they want to send you for blood work to check your nutrient levels. It is always at the top of the list to be tested. So, can you give a little bit of an explanation as to how they test for vitamin D levels? I
Okay.
think it's important for people to know that information because it's just something, like I said, it's a routine test these days.
It is. So let me preface this by saying, in general, I find a lot of the tests that they test are inadequate and don't give a very realistic result for pretty much most nutrients and toxins. Quick example on toxins, actually. So one of the claims within much of the natural health world is that aluminium, is a cause of certain diseases. I don't want to say the diseases just to try and keep it
For sure.
from censorship and so on, but they're blaming certain diseases on certain heavy metals, one of which is aluminium. Okay, so and there's a certain group of children that would apply to, and a certain group of elderly people that also applies to, and there's been a lot of debate about that, and a lot of big pharma have certainly claimed that it's got nothing to do with it and so on. Well, a doctor of the name of Dr. Chris Exley was able to determine.
Wonderful doctor.
Okay, you know who I'm talking about. So
I do, yes.
he was able to determine that this group of children with this particular set of symptoms, certain cognitive issues, had very high aluminium levels. And nobody else had shown that before. And the reason was the testing that he did was a bit different to the testing that they were doing. So what test did he do? Well, his test was done via autopsy. Okay, so he was literally able to cut into their brain and find extremely high levels in certain parts of the brain. None of the tests till then were showing that. It's, so only by autopsy was he able to prove that. Well, most of us can't have that kind of testing done to check out whether we've got nutrients where they should be or toxins or whatever. So it kind of highlights the difficulty in showing a particular, whether it be a nutrient or a toxin in the body with a test, because if you're testing the blood, and it might not be in the blood, it might be somewhere else. When we're testing for magnesium, it's typically a blood test. Only 1% of the magnesium in the body is in the blood. So you're already discounting 99% of the magnesium. Second problem is that it's the most important place for magnesium to be is the blood. So if you're deficient, your body will start taking it from other parts of your body, like your bones, to put it into the blood. So the last place you see deficiency is in the blood, but that's where they test. You could be ravaged, in terms of lack of magnesium before you'll ever see it in the blood. So it's not a very good test. So before I even get into the D test, I just want to say that in general, tests are not that great. People with thyroid issues, if they've had thyroid issues for a few decades, they'll be aware of the tests that told them that their thyroid was perfectly fine, go away, you're fine, because the test was rubbish. Right? It wasn't testing for the right things. They've improved the thyroid testing now, and if you know what you're doing, you can get much better testing now. But so we have to be careful of tests, and we need to always be looking, is this test really giving us the information we need? Right, so let's get to the D test. So first of all, we need to understand with D that there's two types of D in your body, and it's in its very basic level. There's what we call active D, and then there's inactive D, which is in fact, the inactive D is in fact substrates of D, which is to say, let's use the word ingredients. It's what your body makes the D from as it's required. Okay, so there's actually 14 substrates, 14 ingredients. It's not the technically correct word. I'm trying to make it simple. Right, so there's
Less scientific.
not for you actually, but for anyone that might listen. So you've got 14 components that your body can take and make up D2, D3, whatever, 14 to D3. Okay, let's stay on D3. So this inactive D is stored in the fat and in the serum and so on, ready for your body to make into D, okay, as required. Okay, so you can be low in inactive D and very high in active D. So if you only look at inactive D, it doesn't really give you much of a picture without knowing your active D. You can be high in inactive D and low in active D. Okay, they're not necessarily correlated. Of the two Ds, which one is more important? Well, obviously the active D is more. That's D doing something, right? That's more important. Okay, so what they are doing is they are doing a test for only inactive D, and it's worse than that because of the 14 substrates, they're only looking at two of them. So they're looking at two substrates, two ingredients of the 14 of the inactive D, and they're telling you that's your D level. That's ridiculous. If I can give an analogy, it's a little bit like if you have a town and you're going to be the mayor of the town and you've got to decide on money funding for different things. And to do that, you need to know the population. Okay, so you send people to count everybody in the town so you have the population so that you can make plans. So they go out, but they decide what they're going to do is only count people indoors. They're going to ignore everybody out and about working, doing that. They're all ignored, just the people indoors. But worse than that, that's the 14 substrates, the inactive. Worse than that, they're only going to count the people indoors who are in bed asleep. Right? Very inactive. Yeah. Right? Completely, they're in bed asleep. So they go out, they count rather, in this case, all the people fast asleep in bed at any given moment in time. They ignore all the people in the house not asleep. They ignore all the people at work and out and shopping and doing whatever. And then they go back to the mayor and they give that figure as the population of the town. And then the mayor makes all his decisions based upon that figure, thinking that's the population. That's how dumb this is. That's exactly how dumb that is. So we're looking at two ingredient substrates of inactive D, and we're giving that as a figure for our D, completely ignoring all the rest of all the other substrates and how much active or inactive D we have. Now, if we are low in those two substrates, and by the way, they've also changed the figure of what's considered low. They've halved what they used to say was low to make a lot more people low. It's another thing that they play with when they want to manipulate stuff Big Pharma tends to do. So they've halved what's considered low, only doing 2 or 14 substrates, completely ignoring active. Now, then what they do is they do studies and they show that someone who's sick is often lower in these 2 substrates. And they're saying that's because, so that what they don't say 2 substrates, they say they're low in vitamin D. So therefore, what they need is obviously more vitamin D. That's the problem. No, they are low in those 2 substrates of inactive D because the body has made active D out of it. If they measured the active D, they'd find it was high. Why is it high? Because they're sick and their body is fighting something. So they're not sick because they're low because they're sick. They've
Their
got it
body's taking the stored vitamin D
right.
and turning into active vitamin D.
Right. So
Yeah.
when they actually measure D correctly, which is to include all of the D, the active and all of the inactive, when they measure it correctly, it's rare to find somebody low. There's
Very
only
interesting. Yeah.
so with people that worry I don't get enough sun, they probably do. Nearly everybody has enough hormone. Remember, it's a hormone. D.
Yeah.
Nearly everybody. Your body is very capable of making sufficient D. We're not reliant on people eating enough of the right kind of foods or whatever. The main reason why you might be low is a certain subset of unlikely diseases. There are some diseases that you could potentially be low, but very few people are low. Even people in the northern hemisphere, most people have got plenty of D. If you're really, really low in D, which they used to be in the days when they used to have children and working in chimneys and stuff, never seeing the daylight to
Yes.
get the sun, they used to.
Rickets.
Rickets is the sign,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a true sign of low D, right? We don't see that anymore, right?
You
We
literally have to be inside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
right,
Yeah.
and then you suffer low D, and then you have a problem with your
Yeah.
bones because what D does, it does various things, but one of the things it does is it takes calcium from the bones into the blood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one of the things that it does. And vitamin F takes calcium from the blood into the bones. So they work in partnership.
Yep.
Okay. So if you don't have enough D, then you have calcium problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Calcium deregulation. If you have too much D, you equally have calcium issues. You get calcium deregulation, and that's why the supplement that they use, which is synthetic typically, the doctors will recommend, is also used in pest control to kill rats and other animals through calcium deregulation. It's doing that to us as well, a bit slower. You don't notice it so quickly, but all these people that start getting spone burrs and all kinds of problems related to bringing calcium from your bones into your body, into your blood and what have you, that's caused by too much D. Too much D is extremely dangerous.
I agree. And I think we get in trouble with supplements sometimes, right? And we really need to do our research on, synthetic vitamins because I think the general population uses them a lot and we really need to focus on getting our nutrition through food.
Right, right. So one of the problems with supplementing, and I'm a big fan of food supplementation. So
So am
supplements
I.
made from concentrated food, where it's in its whole complete state, in balance, and so on. But one of the problems with typically what they do in supplementation, big pharma, where most of the supplements come from, is that they work on isolates. They'll take a particular vitamin or a particular mineral and give you a load of one particular thing, and that throws balances off. So that's what they're doing with D. A lot of people are supplementing with high levels of D, and it's going to throw their balance right off. And then they're using a test, which is, as I say, fraudulent in my opinion. It's completely invalid way of knowing what your D status is, but they're using that and then taking ridiculous amounts to try and get their inactive D up, which it doesn't do very well. It will get it up. It will get it up, but it's a really bad way of doing it. Isolates in general are not a good idea unless you know specifically that you've got a very big deficit of that one vitamin or mineral, and for a short time you might want to bang it up with an isolate. But in general, that's not the way to go. You want to do it in balance, in food, supplements, or food. The problem with food is that nearly all our food is grown in minerally
Deficient
deficient
soil.
soil, right? So we're
Yeah.
not getting the nutrients in the food. Even in organic food, unless you're growing it yourself. And most people struggle to grow enough of their own food. So that's why you do need to get supplementation, food state supplementation, rather than crushed rocks or synthetics, especially synthetics. Well, they're both bad, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree. I think it's really important to do research on supplements. I think it's important that people know where they're coming from. And like the point you made, a lot of them do come from the pharmaceutical industry. It's $1 billion industry, you know, so
right.
that's something we need to be mindful.
One of the arguments I sometimes get is, I've taken D and it made me feel better. Right. Okay. So let's quickly address that. First of all, you can take a lot of different drugs and feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean that it's helped you? Well, it
Takes
might
care of the
help
symptom.
symptoms. It might have helped some symptoms. So I've got to be honest. If I'm on the occasions when I've been in pain, especially on the occasions when it's been severe pain, I will take a painkiller of some sort. It's a symptom which can drive you mad. Some people,
Mm-hmm.
if it's bad enough, it can literally be suicidal. So there is a place sometimes on dealing with a symptom, especially in the short term while you deal with the underlying cause. So I'm not against always dealing with a symptom,
For
but
sure. There's a time and a place
right.
for medications.
There is. I don't want to say it's never appropriate to deal with a symptom, um, but if you see the symptom dealing as a band-aid, just until you can fix the cause, then that's kind of the way I look at it. So yeah, so D can make you feel better for a number of reasons. So one is, as just mentioned, just like any drug can make you feel better. Um, One of the ways it can make you feel better is because it suppresses, not improves, the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And suppressing the immune system can make you feel better. That's why a lot of people with autoimmune take drugs to suppress their immune system, because it is a way of dealing with symptoms. Suppressing your immune system does reduce symptoms.
Yeah.
Does it mean it's good? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean it's good at all. Just because you feel better doesn't necessarily mean that you've done anything very useful. Okay,
Correct.
maybe you have, but you just can't say just because you feel better it's necessarily good, and you can't say just because you feel worse it's necessarily bad, right?
Correct.
On the other token, so you can have detox symptoms, which means you don't want detox symptoms. When I work with people, I try and minimize any detox symptoms. However, it is a sign that you are detoxing. You just need to
Mm-hmm.
get the detox at the right level for your body. Um, so a fever doesn't feel good, right? Who's had a
Correct.
fever? Everyone, right? Who thought it? Oh, great! I feel great. Nobody. It feels horrible. Does it mean that's bad? No, it doesn't. A fever is
No.
good. A fever is your body's immune system fighting something. If I suppress that fever, will I feel better? Yes, I will. Does that mean it's helping my body? No, it doesn't. Not unless my fever was too high that it was dangerous. It's possible, but not very common. So your fever is fighting something on it going on in your body, and that's a good thing. So feeling bad is a good thing in that situation, and suppressing it to feel good would be a bad thing. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got to stop judging stuff on how we feel. And I see too many people not doing good things because they didn't feel good, or doing bad things because it makes them
Make
feel
them
good.
feel better.
Drinking
Yeah.
alcohol makes many people feel good, right? I personally don't drink alcohol, but many people do, and they tell me I've only drunk alcohol once, um, but,
Wow.
but but many people tell me that they feel good. Great. Does that mean it's doing your body good? No. Especially if you feel, let's call it, feel very good. I mean, I've heard so many people say things like, I don't remember last night, it must have been good. the whole crazy thinking of the whole thing is beyond me. But anyway, so we need to be careful how we judge things based on how we feel. If we were to judge stuff on how we feel, then ice cream is a superfood. So is chocolate, because they make you feel great. They're actually called comfort foods because they
Yes.
give you comfort, right? Should we interpret the good feeling as being good for us? No, we shouldn't. We know it's not good for us. Although it's tempting to think that, uh,
Yes.
because it does feel so great. But no. So we got to go beyond our feelings to judge these things. So when people come back and they tell me that they took vitamin D and it made them feel better and therefore it's just a crazy argument. The studies do not support vitamin D supplementation helping in disease. All the studies that they use are correlation studies. Um,
Hmm.
and you can basically prove whatever you want from correlation.
I agree. And I think, you know, as functional practitioners, we focus on finding the root cause of the symptoms, right?
Right,
So masking the symptoms is not the solution.
right. So if somebody feels that they want to take D, at least get the full range testing. The 25D is what they test for in the inactive D. They want the 125D as well, which is the active form. They want those tests as well. And if you can test your whole D, your active, your inactive, the whole lot, and it still shows you low, okay, you've got an argument. But until you've done that, until you know what your active D is, you have no argument for taking D. But I will give this proviso: if you want to take it, eat it in food, like you want to eat salmon to get D, cod liver oil or something, that's fine. There's no problem with taking the substrates of D in food. Not a problem at all. Eat it; they're healthy foods. But the
Hmm.
supplement, which is nearly always synthetic, unless it's a food-based supplement of D, like we just spoken about, the supplement, do not take that at all, ever. Synthetic poison.
Yeah, and one thing that I just want to touch on, it's a huge topic for another day, but I'm seeing a lot of vitamin D with K2 now. They're promoting K2 with the
Mhm.
vitamin D. Do you have
Mhm.
any insight on that?
Not F. Well, is it not F, which is actually the partner of D? Um, so listen, K2's we need, but we don't need it with a synthetic poison D. So if you're gonna just get your supplements in whole food, whether it be plant or whether it be animal based. Get it from food sources and stop taking the K2D whatever isolates put into, because what they do is they find, oh, we're taking, so for a long time they were taking D, and then somebody figured, oh, D doesn't work without K2. So now, okay, and then all the clever people take it with K2. And then what they're going to find is, oh, it doesn't work without F. And if you
Yeah.
take it in food, as you should, then it all works because it comes in the combinations and the balance that nature gives it to us, which is how we need it. Don't let them try and fit. Listen, there's vitamins and there's minerals they probably haven't even discovered yet because they keep every now and again they'll find a new one. They are so ignorant. Stop letting them make synthetic and rock-based vitamins and minerals and take it from food supplements. And if you're going to use a food supplement and it's plant, you want it grown in minerally rich soil, really, which you either say, or it needs to be ancient, like fulvics and so on, which are from ancient vegetation basis, one or the other, because then it's before the chemicals and before they started messing with the soil and what have you. So you need to be even most of the food stuff is not that great. There's only a handful of companies that make good food-based supplements, but it
Yeah.
needs to be from food-based. You want to grow your own where you can. You want to eat where it's animals. You want to have avoid the factory farmed animals as much as possible and stick to the ones that have eaten natural food, and being free to wander around and eat their natural food, not GMOs, not grains, and all that stuff. And you want to have a nice life and then humanely as possible taken. That's the kind of animal that you want to eat. And if you're drinking milk, again, you want it to be natural, organic, raw, not your processed, store-bought, horrible stuff, which is a lot of anti-milk stuff, and it's all because the milk that they sell is terrible, but it's not how it should be. The actual real milk is a superfood.
Well, it's mass produced, right?
Yeah, all the mass-produced plants and animals, bad.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we need to focus on going back or focus on going back to how our ancestors ate, you know,
Right.
growing our own food, not relying on a system to bring food to stores for us to buy and eat. I think we really need to go back to, you know, using our communities to grow our food and supporting one another in that regard.
Absolutely right.
I think we would have much healthier communities.
Hmm. Absolutely with you. We should, for sure.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for all that information.
No
That was
problem.
great. I think there's a lot for people to take away, and I am grateful for your time.
No problem. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Ethan.